He got down on one knee. Everyone at the rooftop bar gasped. I thought it was the beginning of forever. It was actually the setup for my public humiliation. I still remember the way the light hit the side of his face, warm and golden, like some perfect sunset scene in a rom-com. Zach always did know how to find the spotlight. And I always the planner, the one with color-coded Google calendars and backup charger packs. Let myself believe that maybe this was my moment. My big sweeping gesture, my happily ever after. My name is Alyssa, and at 34, I had built a life with more grace than glitter. I was biracial black and white with caramel skin and coiled hair that I flat-ironed into submission for big events, though lately I'd started letting it breathe. I lived in Chicago in a modest but light-filled apartment not far from Grant Park. I worked in nonprofit event strategy, raising funds and awareness for women's rights organizations and survivors of abuse. My job wasn't just a career, it was my calling. The kind of work that wore you out but left you full. Zach came into my life like a well-cast storm, charming, disarming, and beautifully reckless. I met him when I was planning a fundraiser at a bar downtown. He was the head bartender, effortlessly magnetic, spinning cocktails like poetry, and calling me boss lady with a wink that caught me off guard. He flirted with everyone, but he made me feel like I was the exception. I told myself it was rare to meet someone who could make you laugh and look at you like you were made of some softer light. And maybe I was tired of the dating apps of the men who looked great on paper, but fizzled out in person. So when Zach kept showing up, bringing me coffee during setup, texting clever memes, remembering I hated parsley, I let him in. The first few months were magic. He was attentive, thoughtful in bursts, and always the life of the party. But even then there were cracks if you knew where to look. He didn't ask about my work much. When I talked about the women we served, the long hours, the weight of it, he'd change the subject. When I earned a promotion to Director of Special Initiatives, he made a joke about how he hoped my ego would still fit through our apartment door. We moved in together after a year. I was the one who paid the deposit. I covered more of the rent. He said he was getting serious about launching a mixology training app. I believed him. I even helped him build his pitch deck. He bought a new iPad for the business using my emergency credit card. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself real love means investing in someone else's dream. Our dynamic shifted slowly, like weather. I gave, he received, I planned, he coasted. Every now and then he'd make a comment with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You and your spreadsheets, he'd say. Or, must be nice being the adult in the room. He called me his planner princess when I got excited about organizing our anniversary trip to Asheville. But I laughed it off. It was just his way, I thought. He was the lighthearted one, I was the serious one. We balanced each other. Friends started noticing. My best friend Kira once pulled me aside after brunch and asked gently, "Do you feel safe with him?" I laughed it off. "He's not dangerous, Kira." She gave me a look. I didn't say dangerous. I said safe. I didn't answer. It was easy to excuse the things he said when they came dressed as jokes. The time he made fun of my reading glasses in front of his friends. The time he said I had a savior complex for helping his cousin with a resume. Or when he told me I was aging out of the hot zone and should be glad I'd locked someone down. He said it with a grin, kissed my forehead, and I tried to smile like it didn't sting. And then came that night. He told me to wear something elevated, said we were going to a rooftop bar for drinks with a few friends. I remember the way I stood in front of my closet, my hands trembling with something like hope. I wore the green satin dress I'd been saving, the one that made me feel like art. I curled my hair, did a soft shimmer eye. When I walked into the room, he whistled low and said, "Damn, you clean up nice." The bar was crowded, but intimate string lights, champagne glasses, and skyline views. I spotted a few of our mutual friends, and even his mom, who gave me a tight-lipped smile. That should have been a clue, but I was too busy floating. About 45 minutes in, he clinked his glass, stood up, and said he had something to say. I froze. The entire rooftop hushed. I could feel the blood rush to my ears, my heart pounding so loud I thought everyone could hear it. He dropped to one knee, pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. Time slowed. I saw someone reach for their phone, I saw his mom's hand fly to her mouth. I smiled. I waited. He opened the box. Inside was a red and white ring pop. Laughter erupted. Real, belly-deep, ugly laughter. A few people clapped. Someone took a picture. I stood there frozen in place, not sure if I was supposed to laugh too. Zach looked up at me grinning. "What? You thought this was real. Come on, babe, loosen up." I looked down at him, at the stupid plastic candy, at the people around us who were now whispering, filming, smirking. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. But I didn't cry. Not there. Not then. I just nodded, straightened my dress, and walked away. I didn't cry at the rooftop bar. Not when the laughter grew louder. Not when Zach stood up arms wide like a showman after a punchline. Not when someone from our table shouted, "That's hilarious," and I heard glasses clinking, as if mockery deserved a toast. I didn't cry when Zach said, "You should have seen your face," or when I felt my own cheeks go numb from holding in whatever was threatening to surface. I just turned fixed, a smile so tight, it felt like it was stapled on, and left. He followed me out into the hallway barefoot, in loafers, still laughing. "Babe, come on," he said, grabbing my elbow. It was a joke. Lighten up. That was when I realized. He thought he had pulled off something clever. A prank. An edgy twist on tradition. He truly believed I'd find this funny once I'd cooled off. That I'd be impressed by the crowd's reaction, that I'd admire his audacity. "You take things way too seriously," he said. "That's part of the problem. I was just trying to have fun." I looked at him, his self-satisfied smirk, the smugness still clinging to his voice, and I saw it. For the first time, I really saw it. This wasn't a misstep. It wasn't an oops or a poorly timed gag. It was a performance, and I was the stage. Later that night, Kira called. She had been there, had seen the whole thing unfold. Her voice was soft, careful. "Alyssa," she said, "that wasn't love. That was a setup. He wanted to humiliate you, and he wanted people to see it." I didn't say much, just lay there in my bathrobe, the one with the frayed edges, staring at the ring pop still clenched in my hand. I hadn't even realized I'd taken it. It was sticky now, melting, bright red and ridiculous. The next morning I packed a suitcase. Just the essentials, clothes for a week, my laptop, a few skincare items, and the worn journal I'd been too busy to open for months. Zach wasn't home. I didn't leave a note. When he finally called, his tone had shifted. Gone was the arrogance. In its place, confusion, frustration. "So you're seriously not speaking to me now?" Over that, I didn't respond. Over the next few days, he ramped up the gaslighting. Texts that said, "Wow, I didn't know you were this fragile," followed by, "You're really blowing this out of proportion." He told mutual friends I had stormed out over a joke and that I was emotionally high maintenance. I watched the narrative twist as he cast himself as the victim, poor Zach, just trying to have fun with his too sensitive girlfriend. It made me sick. I stayed with Kira for a few days. I avoided texts, skipped calls, canceled work meetings. I couldn't bring myself to say the words aloud. He humiliated me. Saying it made it too real. So instead, I curled up in her guest room and played back every frame in my head. Not just the rooftop, but the whole damn movie. The way he'd made fun of my age when I turned 33, called me a cougar in training, and laughed when I looked hurt. The time he rolled his eyes when I brought up wanting to buy a condo, then asked if he could borrow $1,000 for a short-term cash flow issue. The way he'd subtly mocked my work. Another fundraiser for broken women, he once said, handing me a flyer I'd spent hours designing. "You sure know how to pick a niche." All of it blurred together as if my brain was finally allowing me to see what my heart had been editing out for 3 years. I cried alone late at night, trying not to wake Kira. I cried in the bathroom with the door locked, mouth covered with a towel. I cried until my body ached. Not just from the betrayal, but from the shame. Shame that I let it happen, that I ignored the signs, that I wanted so badly for it to be love. I ignored the fact that it was slowly erasing me. When I went back to the apartment a week later to gather the rest of my things, I noticed he hadn't touched anything. The same stack of dishes, the same mess on the coffee table. My framed degrees were still hanging on the hallway wall. The home I had furnished and made cozy now felt like a stage set with no audience left. He wasn't there. I didn't tell him I was coming. I took what was mine: the books, the artwork I'd commissioned from a local black woman artist, the blankets my mother had knit me in college, the files with my tax returns and nonprofit contracts. I left him the couch, the TV, the coffee machine. I didn't want any of it. I moved into a small one-bedroom in Logan Square. Nothing fancy, just mine. At my next therapy session, my therapist listened without interruption as I told her the story. The whole thing, start to finish. She was quiet for a long time afterward. Then she leaned in gently and asked Alyssa, "Was he ever truly safe?" I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. That was my answer. I didn't post anything on social media. I didn't expose him. I didn't seek revenge. I chose silence over spectacle, because this wasn't about revenge, not yet. This was about survival. And slowly survival was about to turn into strategy. There was no public post, no dramatic tell-all, no tweet thread with 1,000 likes. I didn't name him, didn't screenshot his texts, didn't feed the internet, the humiliation I was privately sifting through. I didn't need a digital army, I needed air. Instead of exploding outward, I turned inward. The first thing I did was delete every photo of him. From my phone, my laptop, my cloud. There were hundreds smiling brunch shots, blurry vacation pics, goofy selfies at 2 a.m. that once felt like proof of something real. I deleted them without ceremony. No crying. Just click, delete, confirm. Again and again. It was mechanical at first. Then it became medicinal. I took a full month off dating apps, off dinner parties, off anyone who made me feel like I had to explain myself. I told a few close friends what had happened, not the whole story, just enough. They understood. The ones who didn't slowly faded out. I didn't chase them. Every night I journaled. Sometimes full pages, sometimes just a sentence. Today I survived. Today I did not text him back. Today I wore perfume just for me. I got quiet but not small. I got focused. At work, I poured myself into the Foundation's biggest campaign, Yet Women Who Rise. It was a national initiative aimed at resourcing local organizations for domestic violence survivors. My boss noticed. She pulled me aside one afternoon, her brow soft, and said, "You're glowing in a very serious way. We need that energy up top." 3 months later, I was promoted to Director of Programs, the kind of role I once dreamed about from behind folding tables at community centers. I took it with a calm kind of pride, not performative, not loud, just, I've earned this. My first order of business was creating a speaker series focused on reinvention, boundaries, self-worth, building again after loss. I wasn't just coordinating the events anymore. I was speaking. I was the one at the mic. The first time I shared a sliver of my story without names, without drama, I watched a woman in the third row start to cry. Then another. Then one woman came up to me after and whispered, "I thought it was just me." I hugged her hard. It wasn't just her. It was all of us. Behind the scenes, the healing was less glossy. I had nights when I didn't feel strong. I'd still wake up sometimes with dreams of the rooftop bar of laughter that felt like knives. But those nights became fewer. The dreams faded, and in their place something softer began to grow. I started cooking again, slow, joyful meals. Sautéed garlic jazz, playing low wine, poured just because it was Tuesday. I danced in my kitchen barefoot, in an oversized tee and sleep shorts. Nothing sexy, nothing performative. Just movement. Just me. One night I danced so freely, I knocked over a candle and had to open every window to keep the smoke alarm from screaming. I laughed so hard, I startled myself. It had been a long time since my laughter came from the gut. Zach became less of a person and more of a closed chapter. I didn't block him. I didn't stalk his socials. I didn't check who he was dating or whether he was still working on that fake app. It wasn't discipline. It was disinterest. Because here's the truth. No one tells you you don't have to beat someone to heal. You just have to stop bleeding for them. My healing wasn't loud. It wasn't cute. But it was honest. I went back to therapy not just for crisis cleanup, but for the deep stuff, the stuff I'd been too busy to face. We talked about my patterns, about how I'd learned to equate love with fixing people, about why I always overfunctioned in relationships. I realized I'd confused stability with silence, that I mistook potential for love. I started mentoring again. I took on 2 young women, both nonprofit leaders in their 20s, who reminded me of younger versions of myself. Sharp, passionate, slightly burned out. I didn't try to rescue them, I just listened. I affirmed them. I let them know they didn't have to prove their worth to be held in care. My life began to reassemble not as it was before, but clearer, cleaner. Like a house that had been gutted, repainted, and filled only with things that brought real joy. I attended art shows again, bought plants and actually kept them alive. Said no to meetings that drained me. Said yes to solo hikes on Sundays. One day I even wore the green satin dress again, the same one I'd worn the night he humiliated me. But this time I wore it to a fundraising gala where I was the keynote speaker. I walked into that ballroom on my own head high, not needing anyone, on one knee. Because here's what I learned. Healing isn't a show. It's a choice. And it happens in the tiny moments the night you say no, instead of maybe the morning you wake up and don't miss them, the afternoon you spend laughing with women who know the weight of rebuilding. I wasn't trying to win the breakup. I wasn't performing strength. I was simply finally reclaiming my life. And that was more than enough. 3 years later, the Art Institute of Chicago shimmered with light and movement. Women in velvet and silk brushing past marble sculptures, jazz chords floating up from the mezzanine, the soft clink of crystal echoing under a ceiling painted like a chapel. I stood just off stage, clipboard in hand, headset hanging from my collar, even though I didn't need it anymore. I wasn't here to fix the details tonight. I was here to be seen. The theme of the evening was Reclaiming the Narrative, our annual gala, and the largest fundraiser we'd ever produced. Over 500 guests, 7-figure sponsors. We had built a platform where stories once erased women's voices, especially women of color, now rang out as gospel. And I wasn't just curating the space anymore. I was owning it. As co-chair of the National Women's Foundation, I'd helped shape this night from sketch to spectacle. My name was on the banners, my face was in the program, my speech would close the night, but all that glitter didn't rattle me. Not anymore. I'd learned how to stand in a spotlight without needing to be saved by it. During final walkthrough, I stepped through the service corridor that snaked behind the ballroom. The familiar hum of a venue coming to life surrounded me. Florists adjusting centerpieces, production techs checking light cues, catering staff prepping trays. That's when I saw him. Zach. He was standing near the wine station, back slightly hunched, dressed in a black server's jacket with a white towel draped over one forearm. His hair was shorter, the way he used to cut it when he wanted to look responsible. He turned his head and caught my eye. I froze, but only for a second. He blinked, did a double take. I didn't. I kept walking, graceful, straight-backed, unbothered. I didn't flinch, didn't nod, didn't offer him a sliver of my attention. He was air, wallpaper, background noise, the ghost of a boy who once played pretend with a woman he couldn't hold. Later that night, the ballroom glowed gold. Guests buzzed with conversation. Tables overflowed with carefully plated elegance. Every detail, from the centerpieces of wild-grown herbs to the local black-owned jazz trio, was intentional. A reclamation. Nothing for show, everything for purpose. I stood backstage, heels planted, palms steady. The announcer introduced me with the kind of reverence I used to long for, not because of the title, but because of the work. Because I'd shown up, again and again, for others, for myself. The applause was warm before I said a word. I stepped up to the mic, the crowd falling into a hush. My name is Alyssa James, I began. And I want to tell you a story. I didn't name him. I didn't need to. I told the room about a night, not when someone I loved got down on one knee and made me believe in forever. Then handed me a ring pop. Laughter in the wrong key. Public shame dressed as comedy. A moment that should have ended me. But it didn't, I said. My voice didn't crack. I spoke slowly, letting the silence hold what words couldn't. Because sometimes I continued being misunderstood is the beginning of becoming. Sometimes when someone tries to shrink you in front of a crowd, it forces you to step into your full size, not in anger, but in purpose. The room was silent. Still, I could feel them breathing with me. So to every woman who has been laughed at, talked over, underestimated, or left out of the story, you are not broken. You are becoming. You are building. And we see you. A beat. And then the applause. Not polite, not performative. It roared through the room like thunder rolling across polished stone. Women rose from their chairs. Some clapped with hands trembling. Some cried. I let it wash over me not as validation, but as confirmation. From the side of the room I saw movement. A tray in the air. A server paused. Zach. He had stopped mid-stride, frozen, still holding a silver tray with flutes of champagne. His eyes were wide, unreadable. Maybe it was shock, maybe regret, maybe nothing. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Because that applause, that love, that moment, it was mine. And it had never been about him. The night air outside the gala was sharp-edged with lake wind, and the scent of late summer jasmine from the decorative planters that lined the venue's brick steps. Alyssa stepped outside, heels clicking in a rhythm she hadn't realized she'd learned to enjoy, again solid, deliberate present. The event had gone beautifully. People had cried during the keynote, sponsors had doubled their pledges, her team had worked seamlessly. And for the first time in years, she hadn't felt like she had something to prove. She simply belonged. She turned to call for her car, but a voice she hadn't heard in nearly 3 years sliced through the hum of valet instructions and soft jazz playing from the nearby balcony. Alyssa. Her name spoken with the caution of someone who knew they didn't deserve to say it hung heavy in the air. She turned slowly, her face blank but not cold. There he was, Zach. Older, slightly smaller, somehow wearing an ill-fitting jacket over his catering uniform. He looked like a man trying to dress up a version of himself that no longer existed. He had a nervous smile, but his eyes flickered with uncertainty. I wasn't sure you'd recognize me." Alyssa said nothing. Not because she didn't recognize him, but because recognition didn't mean what it used to. He took that as permission to continue. "I saw you inside. You were amazing. I mean, really. The way you spoke." "The room. God, Alyssa, you lit it up." She held her purse gently in front of her, not defensively. Just something to anchor her hands. Still, she didn't speak. Zach's voice cracked a little as he pressed forward. "Look, I've thought about that night. A lot. I was stupid. I thought it was funny. I didn't realize how much I would hurt you. I miss you. I really do. I always believed in you." Alyssa let the silence stretch until it softened the edges of his apology. Then with a calm so quiet, it rang louder than any scream, she said, "I used to think your betrayal broke me. But it built me. So thank you." His lips parted as if to argue. But her gaze made it clear she wasn't asking for a conversation. She was offering a closing. He blinked. "I mean, I always knew you were going places. I wasn't ready for what that looked like. I didn't mean to be cruel, Alyssa." She gave a gentle, nearly imperceptible nod. "But you were." That stopped him. "I was in love with you," he said, a whisper now, like he was remembering it more than confessing it. "No," she said, still soft but firmer now. "You were in love with controlling the room. And when you couldn't control me anymore, you turned the room against me." He stepped forward just slightly, as if reaching for something invisible between them. "I messed up. Can't we just talk? I don't know, get coffee sometime? Catch up." Alyssa took one small step back. Not dramatic, just decisive. "You don't get to watch me shine and call it love." The words landed not like a slap, but like a truth too heavy to ignore. He looked down, blinking hard. She adjusted her shawl, turned toward the street, and waved for her car. It was waiting now. He stayed still, his silence more desperate than any apology. She didn't turn back. She didn't need to. That chapter had been closed, sealed, archived. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was clarity, and she'd earned every drop of it. As the car pulled away from the curb, Alyssa leaned her head against the seat and exhaled long and slow. There were no tears, no lingering tremors, just the soft settling of something that had once been broken, now whole. He was still standing outside as the taillights disappeared. But she wasn't looking in the rearview mirror, because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about her, about who she'd become in his absence, about the version of herself that had been waiting beneath the rubble of humiliation and misplaced love. She didn't need to rewrite the past. She'd already written the future. It started small. A dinner table in Alyssa's apartment, mismatched chairs, candlelight flickering in old jam jars, and a home-cooked meal laid out with love and intention. There were 6 women that first year, friends, colleagues, strangers brought together by whispers of safety and realness. They ate, they laughed, they told the truth. Now, the table is an annual gathering, part tradition, part reclamation, hosted in rotating venues, sometimes in art galleries, sometimes in community centers draped in linens and string lights. It has become a quiet force of its own. There are no tickets, no press, just an invitation and a seat. Women from all walks of life are welcome. Executives in silk blazers, first-generation college students, artists still painting their grief into meaning, mothers rebuilding after custody battles, daughters nursing wounds no one else can see. At the table there is no hierarchy, only heart. Alyssa greets each woman with both arms. She remembers names, stories, and the color of your laugh. She makes space, and she passes the mic. There's no podium, no agenda, just a rule: when you speak, you are not interrupted, and when you listen, you do so with your whole body. Tonight, the long table glows under warm lighting in a converted bookstore. The scent of rosemary roasted vegetables mixes with peach cobbler and the soft musk of someone's gardenia perfume. Music hums low in the background. Nina Simone, then Solange, then silence when someone starts to speak. A woman in her 50s, once incarcerated, shares how she's starting her own nonprofit for reentry housing. She holds the room in her hands, voice shaking, but sure. Another woman, a 20-year-old poetry major, tells the story of how she left a relationship that made her feel invisible and found herself in a thrifted pair of red boots and an open mic. There's wine. There's clapping. There are moments when everyone just nods, eyes full, saying everything without words. Alyssa sits at the center, not to lead but to root. She doesn't speak much unless asked. Her presence does enough. She is living proof. And yes, she's in love again. Deeply, steadily. With a man who shows up with his sleeves rolled, who never makes her feel too big, who holds her without trying to fix her, who asks what she needs and actually listens to the answer. But she doesn't mention him much, because this night, like most of her work, isn't about being chosen. It's about choosing herself. Somewhere in the second hour, a woman stands. Early 30s jeans and a crisp white button-down. Her hands tremble slightly as she clutches her wine glass. Her voice starts quiet. "I almost didn't come tonight," she says. "I told myself I'd be too tired after work. But really, I was afraid. I'm still carrying something that feels too messy to say out loud." She swallows. The room leans in. "I was engaged. And one night at a restaurant in front of all our friends, he told me it was all a joke. That I should have known better. That I wasn't the kind of woman people marry." A few audible breaths, no gasps, just understanding. She continues, eyes locked on the flicker of a candle. "For a long time, I thought that night ended me. But sitting here tonight? Maybe it didn't. Maybe it started something." She lowers her glass. "I just don't know who I'm becoming yet." The room is quiet. And then Alyssa reaches across the table, takes the woman's hand gently in hers, and leans in. "Sometimes the thing that breaks you," she says, her voice low and sure, "is the thing that makes room for who you were always meant to be." The young woman nods. Her eyes well, but she doesn't cry. Not tonight, not here, because she's not broken anymore. She's blooming, and the table is where that bloom begins. As the night winds down, Alyssa helps stack empty plates and fold napkins, her heels now swapped for soft flats. Someone hums a melody from childhood. Someone else reads a poem they scribbled on a napkin. It's messy and gorgeous and alive. She steps outside for a moment, feeling the cool night air wash over her. She thinks of all the versions of herself that brought her here. The girl who loved too hard, the woman who stayed too long, the survivor who kept quiet until she didn't. She doesn't regret her story, not even the rooftop, because from that collapse came foundation. And from that foundation came a woman who knew how to build tables, not for revenge, for refuge. And this time she gets to decide who sits next to her. You're probably listening to this late at night, earbuds in phone screen dim, lying awake with a knot in your chest you don't know how to untangle. Or maybe you're walking head down, heart heavy, wondering how you ended up here again in the echo of someone else's bad decision. Wherever you are, I want to start with this: you are not alone. Because I've been her too. The woman who laughed along to stay comfortable. The one who apologized first just to keep the peace. The one who got dressed up for a moment that wasn't even real, thinking maybe, just maybe this time she wouldn't be the punchline. There was a night not too long ago when I stood in a rooftop bar, under fairy lights, wearing the dress I'd saved for something special. He got down on one knee. The crowd gasped. I remember my heart rising to meet the moment. And then he pulled out a ring pop. Everyone laughed, including him. And I smiled. For 1 second I smiled. Because I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe this was what love looked like when you were grown and tired and just wanted someone to stay. But the truth is, it wasn't love. It was a performance, a setup, a moment crafted not to celebrate me, but to control me, to clip my wings just as they were starting to spread. And the worst part, I stayed silent. For a while at least. I didn't post about it. I didn't expose him. I didn't throw things or burn his clothes or write cryptic captions on Instagram. I just disappeared into myself. I moved out, I cried on the floor, I deleted his pictures, and tried to remember who I was before I made a home in someone else's shadow. But silence isn't the same as weakness, and healing doesn't always look like screaming. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's just getting out of bed. Sometimes it's chopping vegetables for one, lighting a candle for no reason, or finally buying that outfit you told yourself you needed a reason to wear. Sometimes it's just choosing to breathe in your own rhythm again. I didn't rebuild out of spite. I rebuilt out of necessity. Because when someone publicly tries to reduce you, you have two choices: stay small to make them comfortable, or rise up so tall they can't see over the glow of your growth. And rising. It's not as loud as you'd think. It's steady. It's holding your ground in rooms you once tiptoed through. It's choosing friendships that feel like mirrors, not competitions. It's turning down apologies that come with strings. It's mentoring a woman through her first heartbreak and realizing you've finally forgiven yourself for yours. I stopped asking why he did what he did. That answer doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I did next. I built a life that no longer centers someone else's insecurities. I created space for women to speak the truths they once choked on. I filled my days with work that matters, with people who don't flinch when I shine. I fell in love again, slowly, quietly, with someone who doesn't see me as a threat or a charity case, but as a partner. But this isn't about him either. This story is about what happens when a woman finally decides she's not here to be laughed at, stepped over, or politely tolerated. This story is about what happens when she realizes her voice is not too much. Her standards are not too high. Her softness is not weakness. Her intuition is not insecurity. This story is about what happens when she returns to herself. So, to the woman listening who feels embarrassed about what she allowed, to the one who gave too many chances, who shrunk herself to be kept, who can still hear his laugh in her nightmares, to the one who's afraid to start over at 30 or 40 or 57, I want you to hear me. You are not broken. You are becoming. And anyone who tried to make you feel small, watch what happens when you stop shrinking. Because healing is not just possible, it's inevitable if you choose yourself long enough. And no, it won't always feel fair. You'll see him one day working an event where your name is printed on the banner. You'll hear his voice behind the bar, asking someone if they want ice with their wine. And he'll look up, and you'll look forward, and he'll want you to acknowledge him, even if just a flicker. But you won't. Not because you're cruel, but because he no longer exists in the version of you that survived. He staged a fake proposal to humiliate me. Now he serves drinks at events I sponsor. But this story was never about him. It was about me. It was about you. And baby, we're just getting started.